everyone, and welcome to Picture This, the monthly show here on the Dill Pickle Movie Network, where we go through every single Oscar nominee in the history of the Oscars. And it was very exciting because this month we got a whole crop of other nominees to add to this ongoing list and marathon, which we'll get to later. But I am joined alongside, of course, as always, my co-host, Chad Webb. Chad, how are you?
Hey, it's going great, but Dill, I got one word for you.
Mm-hmm.
You listening?
Yeah.
Plastics. Gotta go into plastics.
That's right. Pulling out the quotes from the AFI Top 100. I love it. This month, as Chad alluded to with his quote from The Graduate, is 1967, covering 5 films. A lot of them very iconic staple films just in the whole zeitgeist of cinema itself. But specifically for Black History Month, because we wanted to highlight Black voices. And while none of these filmmakers are Black filmmakers, there is a prominent star who we unfortunately lost a month ago, Sidney Poitier, who starred in 2 of these films. And 2 of these films are notably his most famous, I would say. If you were just ask anyone on the street, name a Sidney Poitier film, they're probably going to name one of these 2. So this is a pretty good way to honor his legacy, but also talk about films centered around Black issues, but also just talk about a great year in cinema. And we'll talk a little bit about how just the climate of cinema in general from the 60s and 70s, like that was really a turning point. And I think we see it with a lot of these films. Those films that I have not even mentioned yet are Bonnie and Clyde, Dr. Dolittle, The Graduate, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and the winner of the Academy Award, In the Heat of the Night. So we have a lot to get to. We will, of course, at the very end, rank these nominees after we talk about all of them, and we will pick a best actor and actress from each from that crop of 5 films. But first, let's set the mood and let's set the tone of what 1967 was, because it's always fun to have a nice little history lesson just going into these movies with the mindset of the time. So, Chad, take it away. Tell us about the year of 1967.
Hey, let's do it. All right, we're going to talk about 1967. Charlie Chaplin released his last film, A Countess from Hong Kong, in the UK. Dr. James Bedford became the first person to be cryonically preserved to be resuscitated in the future. Wow. He still remains preserved at the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. He'll be revived any day now. Maybe. Probably not.
Was that a thing you added, or was that in the
That's a
research?
thing I added, yeah.
That's great.
Pre-human fossils were discovered in Kenya. A trial was held for Wilhelm Harster, a Nazi who was prolific during the Holocaust. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Okay. The Grateful Dead, one of Dill's favorite bands, debuted their first album. Wow. Martin Luther King Jr. denounces the Vietnam War. In San Francisco, 10,000 people march against the Vietnam War. Thurgood Marshall was nominated as the first African-American justice on the Supreme Court, and he actually was elected in there. The British Parliament decriminalizes homosexuality. Wow. Okay, so this one's interesting. I want to see if you know anything about this. Mm-hmm. Race riots break out in Newark and Plainfield, New Jersey, after the arrest of an African American for allegedly stealing a police car.
I didn't know that, but yeah, that's very close to where I grew up. So yeah.
But the race riots apparently reached Washington, D.C. It sounds like something similar to something recent that happened a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. U.S. Navy pilot John McCain is shot down over North Vietnam and taken prisoner. That's all I got for history.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I was wearing my shirt today, the Grateful Dead shirt today. So very very nice little mention there. It was like sitting in my laundry pile right here. I was like, wow, that is a weird coincidence. Speaking of, Chad always tells us about some interesting albums of the year. Do you have any interesting albums to note?
Oh, albums. Yes, we'll go straight to albums.
Oh, I skipped over deaths and births, but I was on the music theme. Let's continue. Let's switch it up a little.
I'll just do it in how I'm holding them. The Doors.
Nice. Wow.
This is one I actually recommended to Dill recently. Love Forever Changes. Mm-hmm. Very beautiful, kind of Beatle-like, but great in its own right. Nice. This is The Piper of the Gates of Dawn, Pink Floyd, their first album. It's really weird how the evolution of Pink Floyd's sound goes. When you listen to that one, it sounds a lot like very Beatle-y and stuff like that. It sounds like nothing like how Pink Floyd became. Magical Mystery Tour of the Beatles. Mm-hmm. Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? The Jimi Hendrix Experience. This is one of the greatest albums ever. The Velvet Underground and Nico, by the Velvet Underground and Nico.
They just made a documentary on Apple TV Plus about it.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles.
It's an all-timer.
Another one of the greatest albums ever made. And then we also had Axis Bold as Love by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, another Jimi Hendrix. Strange Days by the Doors, another The Doors, and Songs of Leonard Cohen by Leonard Cohen. I don't
Wow.
think I have any of those.
Yeah, well, you have a lot to show, so
I have most of them.
I don't think you're lacking in that department.
Nope.
And now, sadly, let's talk about some of the deaths of the year, or you know what? Let's kick it off with some of the births first. Let's talk about the good.
Yeah,
And then
we'll
the bad.
go with the births.
Yeah, births
First.
and then some deaths.
All right, so we had okay. Some of these aren't the best of people, but we had R. Kelly, Dave
Okay.
Matthews, Carrie Green, Emily Watson, Kellyanne Conway, Phil Lamar, Chris Parnell, Vince Gilligan, Billy Corgan, Sam Harris, Liz Phair, Tim McGraw, Noel Gallagher, Paul Giamatti, Dave Navarro, Nicole Kidman, Will Ferrell, Vin Diesel, Reese Ifans, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Matt LeBlanc, Jason Statham, Joe Rogan, Carrie Ann Moss, Ty Farrell, Tom Hollander, Neil Gorsuch, Macy Gray, Harry Connick Jr., Louis C.K., Faith Hill, Liev Schreiber, Denis Villeneuve. Who was this?
It was Dennis.
Pierce, Keith Urban, Scott Wayland, Vanilla Ice, David Guetta, Jimmy Kimmel, Steve Zahn, Mikey D, Anna Nicole Smith, Judd Apatow, Jamie Foxx, and Chris Angel Mindfree.
Wow, yeah, we got some Academy Award nominees for this year in there, like Nicole Kidman, who might be winning an Oscar next year. We got some Pickle Award nominees, like Denis Villeneuve in there. Very exciting.
It's always interesting to like just go and you're like, wait, those people are the same age? What?
Right? Yeah.
So then we have not as many deaths, which is good news. Yeah, I guess.
Yes, always good news.
Jack Ruby, he killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
Wow.
Claude Rains, John Coltrane, Brian Epstein of Beatles fame, and Otis Redding.
Yep. So that's a history of 1967. So now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of shed light on some of the other films of 1967 that didn't make the cut exactly, because we like to, honor our fallen heroes before Oscar night. Chad, were there any notable films that you want to shout out from 1967 that you think are worth mentioning?
Just a few, and I don't even actually think I've seen any of these, but
Okay.
those seem like notable films.
Yeah.
Casino Royale.
Yes.
The
parody one. Yes.
Yes, the parody one. The non-Eon or whatever. You Only Live Twice, I think, is also non-Eon.
Yeah, 2 Bonds. Yeah.
Or maybe it is Eon. I have no idea. The Jungle Book, Cool Hand Luke, Bedazzled, In Cold Blood, the Truman Capote thing, and Magical Mystery Tour.
Nice. Yeah, Jungle Book, the last feature film produced by Walt Disney before his death. Because I believe he died the next year or the year after that. He died somewhere in between there, because then we started getting what is known as the dark age of Disney animation, which was just animated films that just aren't as popular nowadays. I mean, some have slipped through the cracks, like Aristocats and things like that. But that's when you got Oliver and Company, Great Mouse Detective, Black Cauldron, like all those like weirder ones came in that era after his death.
You wind them up and let the Disney nerd just go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you give me Jungle Book, I roll with it. But also some great music in that one too. Speaking of music, also 2 musicals I wanted to note out were Camelot and Thoroughly Modern Millie. They're better on stage than they are in film, but they were movies of this year. We also got The Dirty Dozen, which a lot of people are very fond of. The 2 James Bond films, like you mentioned, The Producers, the original one, Mel Brooks, and then Valley of the Dolls, and Cool Hand Luke. Which actually won an Oscar for supporting actor. It wasn't
I need to see that one.
It wasn't amongst these 5, so we won't be talking about it. But yeah, I want to see that one too.
Maybe it should have been though. I heard that one's really great. Maybe it should have replaced one of these.
Maybe. So in 1968, this is when the Academy Awards were held. They were supposed to be held on April 8th, but as many people know from history books, on April 8th of 1968 was the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. So the Academy Awards were supposed to be held that day, and they were postponed 2 days, which is also just strangely, oddly fitting, just that like the Academy Awards in the wake of Martin Luther King Jr.'s death was the Academy Awards that saw the first not actually, Sidney Poitier didn't win, but he was nominated for 2, or his films were nominated for Best Picture, and they were largely recognizing a picture about race relations with whites and blacks in a southern town. So I think there's some odd poetry to that, but it is also very sad that it had to be postponed because of that. So 1968, tough year. Bob Hope hosted the Oscars, and this is actually the first year where they decided to say, all cinematography is the same. We're not going to split it up black and white and color.
Right.
We're not going to split up costume design in black and white and color. We're not going to split up production design in black and white and color. So those categories, production design, which was at the time known as art direction, cinematography, and costume design, were now combined because there were just not as many black and white films, and they thought, why have so many more categories when you can condense. And then this was also the first time ever that 3 of the Best Picture nominees were nominated for the Big Five. When we talk about the Big Five, it's picture, actor, actress, director, and screenplay. Other films before that had won it all. It Happened One Night won all 5. Silence of the Lambs went on to win all 5, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest went on to win all 5. But this is the first time that 3 of the films were nominated for all 5 of those categories, which is pretty big. And those are Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, all nominated for picture, director, actor, actress, and screenplay. So that's all that was really notable. I mean, obviously the date change with the assassination was the biggest thing. So as you can see, I mean, the tensions were kind of high, but they were all there. This was also the year where I think the president, who I believe was Gregory Peck, actually from Gentleman's Agreement, the president of the Academy, was really encouraging people because it wasn't normally a commonplace thing for everyone who's nominated to be there at the ceremony. Just it wasn't as common for just all the nominees to be there, but he really tried his best to get all the nominees there, and I believe all but 2 nominees were at the ceremony, and I'll explain that a little bit later when we get to one of the movies why that was the case. But just going into Oscar night, just looking at who was the front runner, obviously those 2 awards, the Critics' Choice and PGA, weren't given out yet, but the Golden Globes, all 5 of these movies were nominated, 2 of them in musical and comedy, and we see The Graduate wins musical or comedy, and then for drama, In the Heat of the Night wins over Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Bonnie and Clyde. But then the BAFTA is very interesting because Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Dr. Dolittle do not get nominated. Bonnie and Clyde In the Heat of the Night do, but The Graduate wins. But it doesn't win in 1968. It wins the next year because it was a late 1967 release. So it was technically there for the 1969 BAFTAs. So it was really hard to get a gauge of who the frontrunner was, but people assumed it was between The Graduate and In the Heat of the Night, which makes a lot of sense because one wins Best Picture, the other wins Best Director, which we'll talk about. So starting off, speaking of a great pairing, director and picture, how about one of the most iconic cinema couples of all time, and that is Bonnie and Clyde. Chad, tell us about Bonnie and Clyde.
Absolutely. Bonnie and Clyde, directed by Arthur Penn, written by David Newman and Robert Benton, cinematography by Burnett Guffey, music by Charles Strauss, starring Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, Michael J. Pollard, Gene Hackman, Estelle Parsons, Denver Pyle, Dub Taylor, Evans, and Gene Wilder. It was actually his first role, apparently.
That's right. Yeah, his first role.
The synopsis: a man tries to steal a woman's mom's car. They fall in love and rob banks together. I wrote that myself.
It's a very twisted love story. I mean, you pretty much summed it up.
Based on, life and real events and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of shocking that this is real life because obviously this is a lifestyle that at least I hope you were foreign to. I am definitely foreign to, and I don't think you see a lot of it. I don't think you saw a lot of it in 1967, like this type of lifestyle depicted. And when I said earlier, just like a lot of these movies are big on the transition from like the golden age of cinema to like this newer era of like, the 70s brought us Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola and Scorsese, like that renaissance. Like this was kind of the start of that. And I think Roger Ebert actually said like this was the film that like kind of set the turn of the film style and just what the styles and types of films being made were. And it is very polarizing because of it, and we'll talk about it a little bit. But it's funny because Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, most people know them as Bonnie and Clyde, but I know them, my generation knows them as the 2 people that presented La La Land the award for Best Picture.
For Best Picture.
You're impossible. Come on. La La Land.
Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
I opened the envelope, and it said, Emma Stone, La La Land. That's why I took such a long look at Faye and at you. I wasn't trying to be funny.
So I don't blame them. They were older, and they did get a second chance to redeem themselves, giving it to Guillermo del Toro for Shape of Water. But that's how I knew them. So it was nice to see them younger in this film. I was like, wow, they're so young, and they're much sprier in the brain than they were when they presented the Oscar wrong. But Chad, what do you think of this movie?
Well, I mean, was this your first watch?
Yeah, this is my first watch. I'd never seen this one.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Yeah, this was. I've actually seen this one before, but it was long time ago. It was kind of like when I was like renting, I think, DVDs from the library, and I was like, let me check this out. And I don't think I really liked it then. I like it more now, but this is still not one I really like loved or enjoyed like that much, to be
Interesting. Okay.
honest. But I do think the story's really interesting. I mean, I like crime capers. I thought all
Mhm.
the characters were really good characters. I liked it's a weird, it's just kind of like a tragedy, but like they're like one of the most famous couples
Yeah.
ever.
It's like a
Um,
twisted Romeo and Juliet. Like they do it out of love, but it's weird because like the crime is kind of what keeps them together. It's kind of what kind of spurs their their sexual charisma with one another. It's weird, like
yeah,
turns them on this idea of crime, and it's a weird dynamic that it's totally a toxic relationship, and I think it makes it
right.
very clear throughout. But I just find it really intriguing just the way their relationship dynamic is, because usually you have a crime film where it's like the guy's gonna go out with his guys and go rob the bank to bring home to his woman and kids, which is like the typical thing. But here it's like no, it's a couple. They're both in this together. They're both getting down and dirty, and they're both going into this even keel. So it's really really interesting.
Yeah, because
Just-
like it's almost like because Clyde's character, like
Mhm.
at the very beginning, he's kind of like not. He's like she's like all like kissing on him and stuff like that, and he's like, no, I don't want any of that. And it's almost like for them, the bank robbery is the sex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird thing, especially as an outsider who doesn't know that world. It's like
Right?
this is just a weird thing that brings them together and draws them together. But it's also intriguing that way because of
Yeah.
just how into it they are and how like it's like they get high on it too. It's not just like romantic high; it's like this energy high of it too. And that's why so many people join along and it becomes more of a gang thing. Because I didn't know this was about like a gang. I thought it was just the two of them. And so when they started adding people, and his brother played by
Getaway
Gene Hackman
driver.
came in, and
Oh, Gene
Blanche.
Hackman, yeah.
Blanche, played by Estelle Parsons, who wins the Oscar for this, and is just hilarious. Just her crazy crying and shit when she's running down the street. And they're like, "Where's Blanche? Oh, we gotta go get Blanche." Like she just goes off the rails.
I found her extremely annoying, though. I don't know, like
Yeah,
about
I
you,
think
but I was like,
yeah, it might be one of those like umbrage things where it's like, good, you're supposed to feel annoyed because like she literally fucks a lot of shit up, but she's also like, I found it hilarious just because I was like, this is
okay,
crazy. Like the sirens are going off and the gunshots and the banjo, because every robbery plays out the same. It ends with like a bunch of shootouts, a car driving away, and the banjo playing, the banjo music, which I
yeah,
love. It's a little cyclical, it's a little repetitive, but I like it. But then you just in this one, it's her added crying and just on top of it all.
Damn it! You almost got us killed! What did I do wrong? I thought you'd be having your back and shut! Yeah, it would have saved us all a lot of trouble!
It's very chaotic, but there's a controlled chaos. I think the editing
kind
of
of
this is seamless because they are able to like make it flow so well, even though it's just such a wild, rowdy ride.
I kind of wish they would have maybe had like some Benny Hill going on up in there too, like with all
Yes.
the chases and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like I enjoyed like a lot more individual moments than I did this
Mhm.
as a full
Yeah.
film. And that's not to say that I don't respect it for like
Mhm.
what it did for, cinema and just like, moving things along to us so we can get the movies that, we love today.
Yeah.
And I know some people probably really love this one as well, especially for, all the creativity.
Mhm.
One of my favorite parts in this one is definitely the Gene Wilder part.
Yeah, it's great because it's
They
a small
stole my
little role. It's
car.
so good. Yeah.
That's my car. And
Mhm.
he's one of those where like he's kind of annoying, but in a really funny way
Right.
to me. And I was
Mhm.
like, this is classic Gene Wilder right there.
I'm from Wisconsin originally. Where the cheese comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a small scene, but you can see how just that small little snippet is what kind of projectiled his whole career ahead. Like it was just like
Yeah.
after that, we just start seeing him pop up in so many movies, the Mel Brooks movies and then Willy Wonka. It's all happens in the 10-year span after this. It's like he
Mhm.
became a megastar, and this is how he started. And it's like
Absolutely.
you're competing with people like Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, Gene Hackman, who is like one of just the best actors of all time. And now it's like
for sure.
you're stealing the show in this one scene. That just shows a testament to his power. But like you said, just about the change in the effect on cinema. I mean, I just think it's so interesting that like
Mhm.
before this, you rarely showed blood on screen. You barely
Yeah.
showed violence. You barely showed like sex stuff because like it was considered taboo. And I love just that like imagine what film would
Yeah.
be today without a film like this, without a film like I don't want to go ahead, but like a film like The Graduate, like films like
Yeah.
these that
Oh,
really
yeah.
just kind of captured what the cultural zeitgeist of the time was. And while obviously it's provocative, and at the time people were probably turned off by this film for the reasons that make it the most exciting for us. Like I think the most exciting parts to us are the moments that some other people might find in 1967 to be the most polarizing. And I think that's just a testament to how important it is to like look at the change of cinema in general and just see exactly what the times were like today and in comparison to then. Like, I mean, sex and violence in general. I mean, we have a lot of Bonnie and Clyde to thank. Sometimes movies go a little overboard with it, and then we have to say, oh, shame on you, Bonnie and Clyde. But it's also like, you know, they're not all the same. It's not all the Humphrey Bogarts and Clark Gables going around, you know, doing a little smirk and the women and the damsels in distress. It's not like that. And that's what's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a testament to this year. It's like, it's really interesting. Like it feels like 1967. I know it's 1967. It's not like 1970 or anything like that. It's a random year in the 60s, but it feels like that random year was kind of like a sea change for a lot of film and like indie film and, you know, stuff like that. In fact, I my buddy Austin referred me to a book, and I was listening to the audiobook version of this.
Cool.
I don't know if you've ever heard of this, Dill, but it's called Pictures at a Revolution: 5 Movies and the Birth of the New Hollywood by Mark Harris.
Interesting. I
And
had never heard of that.
Version I'm listening to is narrated by Lloyd James on Audible. I haven't gotten through it. It's like 17 hours, and I started way too late. I didn't know when we were going to record this, but you know, I got through like 6 of the chapters.
Nice.
It's very interesting. It talks specifically about this year, like leading up to this year, and I think it'll probably go after. But it talks about a lot of things that happened beforehand. Like it dives into Sidney Poitier's career, a lot of other people's careers that were around this time in cinema and stuff like that. So definitely recommend that book.
Awesome.
As I've been listening to it, but yeah, it really feels like this year was kind of a sea change, and and I think that's why, I don't know, even though I didn't love a lot of these, some of them I did, but this year in general, I feel like it, even if you don't love these movies, it feels like they pushed, you know, the cinema forward, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like the Citizen Kane debate. People are like, well, how is this the best film of all time? And it's like, well, to most people, it's not. It's just that it's collectively the one that everyone decided is quote unquote the most important because it's the one that showed that you could have, you know, a camera in a room and show the ceiling and shit like that. Just like weird things that we don't think twice about nowadays that is like commonplace now, but like that was just game changing and revolutionizing. And I totally get that because there are some movies here where I'm like, that was good, but I'm like, I'm not head over heels for them, but I'm like, but what would we be without it? And I think that's just a testament to just the film culture in general than Hollywood and what these directors and filmmakers and actors and actresses all brought to the table.
It's almost like, you know, someone will point out something in like a movie or an album or something like that, and they'll go, "Did you hear that?" And then you're like, "What?" And they're like, "That. Do you know how big that was? That was huge."
Yeah.
Like, okay, but because you're used to like already having that. And
it's gonna be when we tell our kids about Avatar. You know what I mean? It's gonna be like there was this movie that came out and like everyone saw it, and it was about these people who became these blue aliens and could connect to the Earth. And I'll go on record saying I don't want to spoil my hand for when we get to 2009, but I love Avatar. But I think it's gonna be a movie that a lot of people are gonna be like, this is the crap you guys thought was like the best movie of all time. And it's like at the time, no one had seen shit like that. Things were floating around them in this theater, and no one knew what to make of these little pixie-like things flying around the theater and just being able to reach out and feel like you could touch them. It's like that was 3D because even kids today don't know what 3D is. I think there was one theater around me showing Spider-Man in 3D. You know what I mean? It's like it's not a thing now, but like we lived through the 3D renaissance for like the 6 or 7 years. You know what I mean?
3D was just like a big thing at some point where it started out being very like novel. Like, whoa, what is that? Oh, my kids 3D. Or and
I could smell it too. Wow.
Before that, you even had freaking like, you know, Friday the 13th 3D, and it was like super novel back then. And then, you know, it started to get a little more relevant, and then everything was like standard or 3D, standard or 3D, and you're
It's
like,
like Alfonso Cuarón won his Oscar for Gravity because it looked cool coming at you at the screen. I'll stand by it that I don't think that movie's that great, but I think for the time, and it's gonna be one of those movies that like I think at the time I would have been like, this is revolutionary, but like nowadays I'm like, whatever. But I have to admit, like it did something for cinema. It got people at theaters going, wow, I've never seen space like this. So yeah, the films are like that, just from totally different time periods, and that's why it's so fascinating. Bonnie and Clyde is tied with In the Heat of the Night for the most nominations of the day. It has 10 nominations. It wins 2 of them. It won for Estelle Parsons for playing Blanche, and it wins for cinematography. Really interesting cinematography. It's not very showy in your face, but it's very smart. A lot of really interesting cuts and stuff. It is nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Arthur Penn, Best Actor for Warren Beatty, Actress for Faye Dunaway, 2 supporting actor nominations for Gene Hackman and Michael J. Pollard, original screenplay nomination, and a costume design nomination. So it got nominated for pretty much as it could have. The only thing I didn't see there is editing, which I think is baloney because I think the editing is some of the strongest stuff in this movie. But yeah, instead of a segue, I'm just going to insert some banjo music here because I think that'd be a fun way to play us off because that's how every Bonnie and Clyde heist ended. So let's just let the banjo play for 5 seconds. And now let's move on to Dr. Dolittle. Chad, tell us about Dr. Dolittle.
Dr. Dolittle. No, not that one. The early one. Directed by Richard Fleister. Written by Leslie Brissussi. I don't know how to say that. Sorry. Cinematography by Robert L. Surtees. Music by Leslie Brissussi. Lionel Newman and Alexander Courage. Starring Rex Harrison, Samantha Egger, Anthony Newley, Richard Attenborough, yes, that one. Peter Bull, Muriel Landers, William Dix, Jeffrey Holder, Portia Nelson, and more. Synopsis. A man can talk to animals and he goes on adventures.
And that's it. That's all, folks. And it's funny because you said not that one, but the earlier one. But now, ever since 2020 with the Robert Downey Jr. one, there's now another one. We try to forget that one even exists. And the Eddie Murphy one I haven't seen, and this one now I have seen, and I have thoughts. Before I completely take this film down because I didn't like it, I will say Richard Attenborough is very good in it though, and he has the only real fun moment in the film. His song is hilarious. Anyway,
guy, that's right.
Yeah, he's a circus guy. Anyway, Chad, what are your thoughts on this film? Because I know you're an animal lover, just like me, even more so than me. Like you love animals, I love animals, but let's talk about the animals. What do you think of this movie?
Well, I mean, I'll say that, like, I grew up watching the Eddie Murphy Dr. Dolittle. I saw both of them, loved them as a kid. Haven't revisited them, but I kind of really want to now because I think that those, even though they're really silly and for kids, is probably a lot better than this movie. This movie, I know we have like a mutual friend who really loves this, but I think it's because he grew up as a kid watching it and stuff like that. And I think this movie requires that. Like you can't, there may be some people, adults who actually really love this film unironically. But for me, like, it's just a really strange movie.
It's strange, but it's so strange and it doesn't do anything with the strangeness to like fit the odd tone. It just feels so sluggishly boring for how crazy the concept it is. It should be the total opposite. It should be, it reminds me of, I don't want to keep bringing comparisons to recent movies, but like House of Gucci, it's like a story that crazy should not be told by Ridley Scott, who does these medieval gladiator movies. It should be done by someone who has like the guy who did Cruella, Craig Gillespie, who did I, Tonya. Like that was perfect because it's a movie about a crazy person in fashion, and you have this person who knows how to bring a crazy eye to cinema. This is a kind of a similar example. I'm like, why don't you have something more eccentric, something more fun, something more family friendly than this? Because there are some scenes here where it's like, I can't imagine a kid sitting through this because it almost seems sluggishly paced. I mean, what is the running time? 152 minutes. And Chad said the same thing I did when we first watched this. We were like, how long is it? Like 2 hours and 32 minutes. Like that is, geez, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies that have run times like that definitely don't earn those run times.
It's a sweet concept. It is. I mean, it's based on something sweet. Like there were children's books, but it's like a children's book does not need to be adapted into a nearly 3-hour movie when it does feel like 3 separate movies in and of itself. Like you can watch the first 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes, and they have nothing to do with one another. You know what I mean? It's like you're going through his own different adventures, but they don't make it seem episodic enough to where they don't justify it as an anthology, like something like The French Dispatch. It's not very clear that it's like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Instead, it's like it feels like one big movie, but it is kind of 3 episodes in one. It's a very weird way to format the movie,
and it just doesn't really feel like the character really like goes through any progression or learns anything. I don't think any of the characters really do. The songs are okay. I never saw any of the songs that I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna put that on my Spotify. I mean, of course, there are a lot of older songs, but I mean, there's a lot of older musicals that I love.
The next film we're going to talk about has one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. So yeah, decade is not an excuse for good or bad music. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, I just went through a ton of some of the greatest albums ever made. But yeah, like as far as the music goes in this, it was really nothing to write home about, and I don't even really know if it really needed it. Maybe if you had like a lot less of that, you could have actually crafted a better story rather than focusing on making it a musical. Like it didn't even really need to be a musical. But I think the other thing that kind of, and I mean, it really feels like I'm, taking a crap on this movie. I'm not trying to do that. Like I think,
and honestly, it's fair if you do, even because like we have opinions, and I think we both are on the same page that this was the weak film of the bunch for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's somewhat had some good messaging in it at least. I know there's probably a lot of kids who just love this movie, like they grew up with it, or adults now, obviously, who grew up with this movie, or some kids maybe even watch it today and like it. I'm not sure, but I think the reason, the messaging that I really liked is just a lot of the animal stuff where it's like, when you eat meat or you wear fur and stuff like that, you're actually, you're doing damage and, stuff like that. Like, I'm not a vegetarian or anything like that, but, I try to, we eat vegetarian every once in a while, and try to be conscious of that and, reduce our footprint and stuff like that. But, I think it somewhat has some good messaging, but I think the other thing that, kind of the behind the scenes that I learned a little bit is like, it seems like this was in the same vein of like, one of your favorite movies, Singing in the Rain, and then another one that we've covered, The Artist. It feels like this is the one that was trying to hold on to the past while the other ones were looking towards the future.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of why. And then the other thing that I heard that this might have been one of those kind of like other ones we may talk about in the future that might have like bought its way into a nomination.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. I was like, this one's revolutionary for something completely different than the others, in the fact that this revolutionized Oscar campaigning, because this was not well received. The critics, this was a box office bomb. No one really saw it, and it wasn't very well received by critics. So people were confused why it got 9 nominations, and it's because of the studio lobbying. And it's because it was 20th Century Fox. It was a big studio. They could afford to lobby it like that. And it's like, we have a bunch of cute animals. How can you say no to these? And they kind of use those messages to say, if you don't nominate us, you're anti-animals. And it's like, no, that's not the point. Like, and that's, I think the difference is like, a film can have a good message, but it's like, if your message stops and ends in the first 5 minutes, if you can convey your message in 5 minutes, then you really need a good film to back it. And I think there are some films that like keep bringing up their messaging in interesting ways. Like some of the new Jordan Peele horror movies, they weave the messaging so well. Exactly. I haven't even seen that film, but I know what you're talking. I've seen reviews on it and I agree. But like, there are some movies that it's like, yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. Now, what are the next 2 hours going to be about? And it's like, oh, it's going to be about this? And I mean, the scene with the seal, and I don't know if you remember it, but he's standing on the cliff saying goodbye to a seal who's dressed in clothing, and he like, it's almost like a romantic goodbye.
1,000 goodbyes when I look in your eyes.
And then he chucks it in the ocean. It's supposed to be this like romantic moment. It's just so weird. Like, and that's the thing, is it's weird, but it doesn't lean into like the weird. You know what? If you really want to revamp this and make this good, have like David Lynch direct it. Have something so crazy that it's like you can commit to the bit. Like even bring it back with Tim Burton or something in the 80s. Like give a director who has a very distinct vision and can get weird with it, because this is just weird for the wrong reasons. It's like the fishermen think the seal is a woman and mistake him for murdering a woman because he throws the seal into the ocean. So they're like, you're being framed for killing this woman. And he's like, I threw the seal back in the water. Then don't dress it like a woman, Dr. Dolittle, if you're going to get in trouble now. And then he has to go to this island to get out away from it. And then he finds this giant pink sea snail. It just all doesn't really add up. And I know I'm going into a little rant right now, but it's like, it's one of those things where I think it works better on paper because your
Just want you to
imagination
keep
can
going.
your imagination can make it as zany as you want it to be. But on screen, you're literally watching someone else's imagination. That's the one thing, books versus film. I'll always take film's side because it appeals to me more. But I think the thing that books have over film is that you can kind of make up your own vision of what it's supposed to look like in your brain.
Yeah.
Here, we're forced to watch whatever this boring ass vision is, and it's not entertaining. And I mean, it's such a shame because like I was so excited for this ending. I was like, all these movies are heavy. I mean, we have these two this crime couple who gets shot in the street at the very end, the most iconic ending ever. You got a woman seducing a kid who just graduated college, and then him cheating or having a love triangle with her and her daughter. You have a woman bringing home her black fiance to dinner for the first time. You have a black cop, in the South trying to solve a murder but deal with racism. That's all heavy. Let's look at this cute little animal movie, and I'm like, this is the worst one. Like, this is supposed to make me happiest, but I had more fun watching Bonnie and Clyde get murdered than I did watching this, and I shouldn't feel that way. Just out of sheer happiness. And it's like, I just wish this could have been better because it has talent, like you said, like Richard Attenborough. I mean, and he does do a great job. He brings as much as he can to the role for 5 minutes that he's in it. But it's like, I mean, make this 90 minutes and it's probably like a 3-star film or whatever. But I mean, this is just, it was so tough to get through.
Exactly. I think maybe one thing that we could do is we could actually take, because it feels like a lot of the movies that are really, really bad that got nominated for Oscars, we agree on. It's like maybe one day we could make a list of the ones that we are like, these should not have been nominated.
Yeah. And maybe how to improve them too. Like we give them a new star, a new director, like how to revamp them and make them worthy remakes for Oscars in the future. Like how do we get Wilson from 1944 an Oscar win in 2023?
Let's workshop a video on that. I do have one more question for you though. Did you see the 2020 version of this?
I did, and I'll tell you right now, it is bad, but it's one of those things where like I almost appreciate it more because it at least kind of goes crazy when it wants to. I don't know. I mean, there's a scene. Have you seen it or no?
No, not yet. No.
There's a scene where Robert Downey Jr. has to pull something out of a dragon's butthole because it's bothering the dragon or whatever. I can't remember too vividly. It's one of those movies I don't have at the forefront of the brain, but it's bad for its own reasons. But I think the reasons that this is bad is worse than those reasons because those reasons it's like, oh, this is so dumb, but like it's kind of entertaining in its badness. Here it's just like, this is bad and boring. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting. It's one of those things where it's like, would you rather a movie that's just worse but entertaining, or mediocre but not entertaining?
Absolutely.
And then it's an interesting debate. Dr. Dolittle nominated for 9 nominations. It wins 2. It wins for special visual effects, which the animals, they're cool, whatever. Original song, Talk to the Animals. I vaguely remember it. It's one of the more memorable songs, I guess. It was also nominated for picture, original score, original song score, or adaptation score. So I guess there were 2 score categories. That feels like rigged to me. Art direction, cinematography, sound, and film editing. So it did pretty well. It won 2 awards, which is more than the next film won, which I'm very surprised about. But Dr. Dolittle, I mean, you got to give him credit. He had to go through lots of school to get his doctorate, right? He had to go through the college process. He had to graduate. Speaking of, let's talk about The Graduate. Why don't we?
All right, absolutely. The Graduate, directed by Mike Nichols, written by Buck Henry and Calder Willingham with an asterisk next to his name. Cinematography by Robert Surtees, music by Paul Simon and Dave Grusin. Starring Anne Bancroft, Dustin Hoffman, Catherine Ross, William Daniels, Murray Hamilton, Elizabeth Wilson, and Norman Fell. Synopsis. Benjamin Braddock, a recent college grad with no aim in life, is seduced by an older married woman, but subsequently falls in love with her daughter.
That's right. Chad, what did you think of this film? Being a fan of music, I mean, it's got to have one of the best soundtracks of all time. I know this is a more recent first-time watch for you, so what are your thoughts on The Graduate?
Well, first I wanted to note that it is based on The Graduate by Charles Webb. Apparently that book, I've heard, wasn't super, super great or anything like that, but Mike Nichols and the gang went and made a pretty damn good film here. I gotta say, this recently, I haven't seen it as many times as you, and I've seen it way more recently for the first time. But I've kind of started falling in love with this damn movie.
Yeah, me too.
This movie is fantastic. I love pretty much all of the performances, even the ones that you're supposed to kind of love to hate.
Right.
Just the soundtrack, like it just makes me want to pop on, Simon and Garfunkel on vinyl because I just love Simon and
Hmm.
Garfunkel. I love Paul Simon, just
Hmm.
Graceland, just
Yeah.
all of their stuff is just so great.
Yeah.
And the music choices in this, especially like where they're placed,
Hmm.
even just the ones where it's like, Mrs. Robinson or whatever, where it's like just as he's driving, and then it's
Yeah.
slowly running out of gas, and it's like. I just love the
Yeah.
way they
It's
do
great.
stuff like that. It's just,
And if
but I feel like this movie is kind of like movies today that you see that you'll go to like an indie theater to see. It kind of
Mhm.
feels like this might have been like the first one. It's kind of
Yeah,
like
I mean,
this is the first like indie film like you'd want to go see, and
yeah. And what's so interesting about this is that it's made for $3 million and it
yeah,
makes a whopping $104.9 million, which at
nice.
the time is even more like you cannot even put that into today's terms. I mean, adjusted for inflation, that's $857 million. Like that is
Mm,
insane amount of money,
dang.
and I think a lot of that is due to the soundtrack and the fact that you have some bankable stars. I mean, you got to look at the soundtrack too. They really only play 3 or 4 songs, but they play them
Yeah.
a few times and they use them so effectively.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
That it's almost
Exactly.
a question of quantity versus quality. It's like, would you rather have 30 needle drops that you can say, "Hey, I recognize that song," but it doesn't really make sense in the context of the movie, or is it better to say, "Oh, I know those 3 songs, and those were used so well," like you said, when he's on the chase. I mean, that whole last 10 minutes is like a chase to get to this chapel, and he's facing all these obstacles, and it's like the music kind of uh, captures his internal state as he's going through this, and it's
I wanted
really
to
brilliant.
throw in there when you said, do you want to just throw in a bunch of songs, don't matter like where they're placed? Suicide Squad, anyone?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly. But yeah, I think it's interesting because Mike Nichols also said it was originally going to be scored, and then he hears the sound of silence, and he says, "Wait, I want to use that." And then he says, "Can you write us a new song?" And they write Mrs. Robinson. So some of these songs are already
that's
pre-existing
fun.
songs. Some of these songs were written for the movie,
Yeah.
like Mrs. Robinson. But I think that's great. That like you, a director should not have a strict outline that he sticks to beginning to end. I think you should be able to adapt and like add stuff or take away stuff. And I think that's so beautiful that he said, "You know what? I want to add this music," and then like I want them to write a song for it. And that is what a lot of people take away from this movie is the songs and the music when that was not originally intended. And I think that's just a beauty of being malleable and flexible as a director. And that's why while the only Oscar this wins is Best Director, it doesn't win anything else, and it doesn't even win Best Picture. But I think the directing Oscar is in this case one of the most justified earned wins, I think, because the direction is what makes this great. And like you said, the source material, when you read it, there's not a lot there. But then once you put it in the context with the different angles and who they decide to focus on in the frame, who has the power dominance just with the two of them in the hotel room, every time
Yeah.
he flicks off the lights and every time she flicks them back on, that is an assertion of power dominance. And like just that whole idea of the switch halfway through where he ends up with Elaine now and the mother is now seen as this almost playing the victim, whereas she had so much power, and you see her in this tiny little hallway looking so tiny because of her shame and her guilt. Like the brilliance that he brought to the directorial side of this movie made it so much better than it had any right to be. And I really think if any other director directs this, there's a chance we don't even know what this movie is in 2022. I really think that is because I think Mike Nichols is 100%. I mean, obviously the music and the actors are obviously to thank too, but I think Mike Nichols first and foremost is the one who should be applauded for making this as good as it is because he took something that was a very basic source material and made it so nuanced and so brilliant to the point where I think this is the best cinematography of maybe any movie I've ever seen. The camera tells the story. I think that's even better than something that you can just frame and use as a screensaver. I think an even better use of cinematography is when you can say, oh, okay, so the fact that they zoomed in on him and she's out of the frame means that we're seeing it from his perspective, or the shot where you're seeing from inside his diver's mask, which was the first time anyone had ever used that shot. And ironically, the very next year, 2001: A Space Odyssey uses the same shot. So it's like a lot of people lose track of what is so important to look for in direction cinematography. It's not necessarily going big; it's making the small details stand out, and that's what this film does so well. And I just, like you said, you fall in love with it every time you watch it. Same here. I don't intend to watch it as much as I do, but I always come back to it for some reason, and I don't know what it is. I just keep coming back to it because it's not a story you would think on paper like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go watch The Graduate. It's not something you think, oh, I want to go watch this guy have an affair with his girlfriend's mom. Like it's not a movie typically that people would be drawn to, but I am for so many different reasons. Like I said, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think Mike Nichols really knocked it out of the park. And this was like, I think supposed to be like his debut film at one point, but it kind of got pushed, and he did
Yeah.
the Virginia Woolf movie first.
Yeah,
But
it was one of his first. Yeah.
but yeah, but then it was one of his first, and it's like, this like really young director. Like I think I remember hearing them say that like when he was going to direct this, like he barely even knew what he was doing. But then I think somewhat like that kind of makes it like amazing. It's like, kind of like Sam Raimi with the Evil Dead. It's like,
Yeah.
learning from just trying to learn. Like, what if we do it this way? It's almost like if you have a seasoned person, they're going to do it the traditional way, the way it's always been done. And then these new people are like, no, why can't we just do it this way? Let's invent this. And the way they invented the shot, like I was watching my Criterion version, and they were talking about like the shot that they put the camera on the pole so you can go up the apartment building, like follow them going up the stairs. And it's like so many things in media these days use that shot because The Graduate invented it. And I feel like, that's just like something that's so brilliant. It's like this movie is so great on like an artistic level and like performances. The story's amazing. But also exactly just all the technical stuff is just so good too. Some of the shots in this are still some of the most iconic shots of all time.
Yeah.
Like the view of like him, like like not between her legs, but under her leg.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
But also just the thought of like the casting of this film, like, this changed the game in that way too, because before this movie, everybody who wanted to star in this movie had to be like this hot person and stuff like that. And Dustin Hoffman even was like, I'm not even right for this role. Like, I don't know why I'm even reading for this. I'm not like a hunk star. Like, I forget the people that were like Robert Redford at the time and stuff like that. But like,
I do have a list of the actors who were up for all three roles, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
For Benjamin, it's Robert Redford, Warren Beatty, who was in Bonnie and Clyde, Charles Grodin, and then Harrison Ford auditioned but turned it down. Also, Jack Nicholson, Anthony Perkins from Psycho, Brandon DeWilde, and Burt Ward were all in talks for the role. So that's a really good lineup, and I'm so glad it went to Dustin, to be honest.
Because I love stuff like this, because like one of my favorite things is like when you get an actor like Dustin Hoffman, like Jesse Plemons, like Caleb Landry Jones, like a lot of people who aren't classically like handsome or anything like that, but they're phenomenal freaking actors. They come in, they nail the part, and it's like you can almost see like yourself in the role a lot more, unless you're incredibly attractive or something like that. But like an average person can see themselves more in a role like this than they can like The Sting or something like that with classically handsome like Robert Redford or Harrison Ford, as Han Solo or anything like that. But yeah, we've talked so much about like the technical, the artistry and stuff, but like the story I just think is just really interesting too. Like, it's a kid coming home from college. He doesn't know where he's going to go. His parents have so much expectations on him. They want to gear his life. And also his dad is freaking Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World. Yes. I was like, Feeney.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and then like he gets seduced by this older woman and he doesn't want to go there. And then like, I was like, it's pushing some boundaries because it actually like subliminally like shows like her naked, and then you're like, whoa, okay, this was like,
but it does it in the most subtle blink or you miss it way, because at the time that was taboo. I mean, just the idea of him even flirting with his mother was taboo, and let alone sleeping with her. And it's alluded to that he eventually does, maybe not right away, because you need someone who's going to be able to play it. And I think that's why Dustin Hoffman's important, is because he plays it well, because he needs to be kind of awkward and uncomfortable. He can't be the most handsome guy, because the most handsome guy probably would have already done it already. And the fact is that he is being taken advantage of, and he doesn't know what to do. And that's why he does this, is because he's like, well, this is my window of opportunity. This is what's going to make me a man. Because that was also the societal pressures put on people, was like, you graduate, you're going to go in the workforce, you're going to be a man. And it's like, what? That's why there's scenes of him shaving. And, they always want to kind of remind you of the way society wants a person of this age at the point in their life to be. And it's weird, because I just graduated, so like watching this movie now, I'm like, oh, this is so weird, because it's a lot of the similar conversations of like, well, what's your life going to be? The cycle in my brain, but also relatives ask me like, oh, what's your life? What are you going to do with your life? And it's like, no one knows right away. Some
Has
people do, and they're
anybody
lucky, but some
has
people don't.
anybody asked you if you're going into plastics yet?
No, thank God. But that it's funny because it's like similar things though. Like it's just really
Right.
interesting to see myself in this role. And obviously I wouldn't, sleep with a friend of mine's mother because of my,
Rule it out.
quarter life crisis. But I mean, like it's understandable why he does because it gives him a
Right.
sense of maturity. My favorite scene is him walking around the hotel room, the hotel lobby. I mean, and he's like, you got any luggage? He's like, oh yeah, in the car. He's like trying to act all cool.
Well, it's in the car. It's out there in the car.
Very good, sir. I'll have a porter bring it in.
Oh, no.
You realize how giant this lobby is and how tiny he looks in it, and that's another beautiful use of the camera work. It's like he's just such a small fish in such a big pond, and it's honestly kind of funny. It's a drama, but it's funny. I laugh a lot in this movie. It's
It is
very
really
funny.
fun,
Yeah.
And then like he gets like kind of driven to like he's not even really that interested in going out with her daughter, and then he kind of gets driven there because like she doesn't want him to so much, and I think he feels like he's done something wrong, and he wants some sort of like normality, and like he ends up kind of stalking her after he like messes up the first date and stuff like that, and then actually she finds out about the her mom and stuff, and then they have to go, and then his landlord's Mr. Roper from Three's Company.
Yes, and I don't know if you noticed, but one of the guys who comes through the door when she screams and they open the door, one of the other college kids who peeks in is Richard Dreyfuss. It's his first role in this too. It is a young Richard Dreyfuss. So this year gave us Gene Wilder and Richard Dreyfuss. So
wow, I didn't even recognize. That's so crazy.
It's funny because I never really liked the Elaine and Benjamin relationship the first few times I watched it because I was like, it just comes out of nowhere to me. But at the same time, watching it now, I'm like, this is the whole point, kind of, is that like he is finally allowing himself to be just a guy who's free and is in control of his own life rather than what society wants you to be. And I think the societal version wants him to grow up so fast that he jumped into this thing with Mrs. Robinson, when in reality, he just wants to have this really nice love affair with the younger girl that he actually has an emotional connection to. Because Mrs. Robinson does not give him an emotional connection. It's all purely physical and manipulative. Even in that moment where she kind of breaks down and has like an emotional moment of like talking about her pregnancy and how she had Elaine and all that stuff, it's meant to make the audience empathize with her, but it's not meant to make him like her any more or less. And I think that's why the Elaine relationship is so important, because it's supposed to remind people of like my age, like it's okay to just be a kid still. Like, yes, you graduated, but it's like enjoy life and being single and just enjoying these opportunities before you become an old man and are tied down. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just think like, Miss Robinson is just like one of the greatest villains, because it's just she's just so undercutting and manipulative, like you said, and just like you can see like her face, because like he goes to because she's going to get married to another guy because that's what she thinks she's supposed to do, and then he goes to the church to stop it, and this kind of like reminds me, the first time I was watching this, I was like, this reminds me of freaking Wayne's World 2.
Yep, they do an exact parody of it. Yep.
Exact parody, and it's amazing. And he's doing that. You can see Mrs. Robinson turn around, and at first, before the parents are yelling at him and stuff, she has like this smile on her face, like, haha, you're too late. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a villain.
It's almost like the wicked stepmother, except the wicked stepmother also happens to be the third of the love triangle. And that's what makes it so interesting, is it's like you're not just dealing with, because we'll talk in the next movie we're about to talk about, the relationship between meeting someone's parents in a relationship. You have the extra bonus of it being your girlfriend's mother while also being your ex-affair hookup. And it's so weird. Like no other movie has that kind of dynamic. It's like very rarely do we see relationships like this. And the closest thing I can think of is the new release from last year, Shiva Baby, where the guy she's like hooking up with shows up at this funeral with his wife and baby. And it's like just these awkward scenarios of like when you're in person around all these people, like when she comes over to the house and Miss Robinson's just at his house, and it's just weird energy. And it's
so much tension built up.
Yeah.
And
until
they're watching it like Shiva Baby, you're like, okay, what's gonna happen here?
And until he goes on that date with Elaine, she's got him in the palm of her hand, which is why I think I always used to be a little less satisfied, because I thought the Miss Robinson dynamic was the more interesting one. But I think having him go out with Elaine, it almost makes the whole dynamic so much even more compelling because it's like now we get to see what happens when Miss Robinson doesn't have control. And honestly, those are the moments where I hate her, but I also empathize with her a little bit because it's like she's also been wronged, and she, I think, kind of saw she was able to cling on to some of her youth through Benjamin, whereas he was clinging on to like this maturity that he didn't know yet with her. So it's a very interesting power dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, but I mean, in a way, even though she's doing that, like she's still like it's not like you know, he's of age, so he can make the choice, but it's like he's still like an impressionable kid. Like you know, just because you're like 21 or something like that, you're still impressionable, you know, at some point. Like, you know, even I mean, I'm above 30 now, and I still, you know, have things that I don't understand, and I'm still trying to figure out. We're always learning, but yeah, I mean, this movie though is so great because then I love the shot of him fending away everybody with the cross.
Yes. Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, that's great.
But then I love, you know, everyone talks about this great moment at the very end where it doesn't end at the happy ending necessarily. It's them. There's, you know, they'll both smile and the smile will fade away, and then they'll have the smile again, and then it fades away completely. And then they're like, you have the ambiguous, like, did they do the right thing? Did they think that they did the right thing?
I don't think they know the answer too, which is interesting because then you bring in the sound of silence again. And it's like this perfect musical motif of just like not knowing the right thing. Because at that age, you're not supposed to know if it's right to get married right away. Like literally, we see so much growth, but at the same time, he still kind of ends right where he started in the fact that he's still just a young guy ready to take on the world. But now he's at the back of this bus with this girl who's in a bridal dress. And it's like, well, here you go. And you could end the movie with them smiling and just assume it's all happy ever after. But what just happened? He just literally forced her to leave her fiance at the altar. And he knows that if there's going to be a future, that his mother-in-law is going to be his ex-fuck buddy. And it's like that is something crazy. So I think I love the deadpan look at the very end because they're like, oh shit, what do we do? But at the same time, it's like, there is some hope for them, but there's not hope for them. And I don't think there has to be an answer either. I think it's whatever you want to interpret it to be. I like to think that it doesn't work out just because it's like, I think the whole point of the movie is to say that like he still has a lot to do growth wise, but who knows? I mean, maybe they do end up happily ever after. I'd love to see it, but I don't know.
Let's never see The Graduate 2, please.
Yeah, no, I don't need it.
This is a near perfect movie on its own.
Yeah, and I love that cross moment too. Like it's probably a moment that Dustin thought was like, "Oh, can I grab this?" And Mike was like, "Yeah, sure." Like I really love that idea of him being so young and not inexperienced, but so fresh that it's like he can take these big swings, no pun intended. But you know, and kind of autobiographically tell a little bit of his own personal experience being a young person through Benjamin, because it just totally nails the whole concept of just youth in general. Yeah, such a good film. We go on another hour talking about it. Like I almost want to do a commentary track myself for this one day.
Yeah.
It's so good. Graduate only nominated for 7 Oscars, which is okay, and only wins 1, which is also just so crazy. Wins director for Mike Nichols, which is a very deserving nomination, but it loses these next few Oscars, and it loses Best Picture, it loses Best Actor for Dustin Hoffman, it loses Best Actress for Anne Bancroft, it loses Best Supporting Actress for Catherine Ross, Adapted Screenplay, and Cinematography. So it doesn't come up empty-handed, but it comes up short-handed. But guess what? It's all going to be okay because after the Academy Awards, they're just going to go to dinner and have a great time. And guess who's coming to dinner, Chad?
Who?
I don't know, but tell us about guess who's coming to dinner. Maybe we'll have that answer.
Okay. All right. I guess who's coming to dinner. I thought you were going to tell me something there. Directed. No,
I was just trying to make a segue. And
is it Stanley Kramer that's coming to dinner? Because that's who directed it.
Sure, Stanley Kramer's coming to dinner.
Written by William Rose. Cinematography by Sam Leavitt, music by Frank Duvall, starring Spencer Tracy, Sidney Poitier, Katharine Hepburn, Catherine Houghton, a lot of Catherines, Cecil Kellaway, B. Richards, Roy E. Glenn Sr., and Isabel Sanford. Synopsis: a woman comes home from a trip to Hawaii with a black boyfriend to introduce to her parents, who are not black.
Yeah. And it does not Get Out. It does not end with murder and a missing person. It ends with a very happy moment. And it was, once again, another one of those films, taboo at the time. You know, it's about this interracial couple, and we had never really seen a lot of that on screen, especially big-time, high-profile films like this. And this is one of the first, right before the Loving case, literally filmed right before the Supreme Court case with Loving versus Virginia. So, like, this is, like, right in the midst of just when all these issues are coming to light with the civil rights movement. Yep.
Yeah, I mean this movie was interesting. I don't know. This is one like, I try to put myself in the mindset of a person watching this in 1967 who, is kind of like, either like super racist already, or like, they're like kind of like one that's like, well, I'm not racist, but, and then you have the but there, those kinds of people and stuff like that. And like, I try to put myself in that time, and sometimes it's just super hard. It was really hard for this one. I was like, I was trying to get, because, I'm like, Katharine Hepburn, she's like one of the great actresses, right? And I was trying to like identify like with their characters, or just trying to see where they're coming from. But like, I just felt like she spent the whole movie just crying the whole damn movie. And the dad was just like, upset because he couldn't eat ice cream. And I was like, what is this movie?
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. I really was trying to get into it. I did like that it seemed like it was a precursor to stuff that I really love, like Get Out.
Yeah.
I really liked the relationship between Sidney Poitier and Catherine Houghton in this, because I loved her like kind of like matter of fact attitude, where she's just like, yeah, I'm dating a black man. Like, what of it? And it's just kind of like, that's kind of an interesting attitude for like the 60s, I feel like. It just kind of seemed like a lot of people were like, there's something of it. And then she's like, no, there's nothing to it. It's fine.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because like nowadays it's like interracial couples are, commonplace. We see it all the time. And especially, just in the context of this time, I do see how this was revolutionary in the fact that like your main female protagonist never once had a prejudiced bone in her body and said just like, oh yeah, no, it shouldn't matter that I'm dating a black guy. Like that's just how it is. But to the parents, like I understand at the time why you would be emotional and like kind of have this like moment of shock at first. And I think also some of it comes to play with the idea that they just met a week ago. And I think that's also part of it. I almost wish that it had been like we've known each other for a few months, because I think having the whole we met a week ago thing, it would make anyone, white, black, or any race couple, it would make their parents turn off. Like I know if someone came to me and was like, oh, I've known this guy for a week and we're going to get married, no matter what race you are, that's a weird thing. So I think honestly, if you eliminated that point, I think it would have, rang a bit truer. But I think it's very true though, to the time where you would have parents who always preach, to be accepting of all genders, creeds, colors, religions. But then when it happens to your own kid, it's like, oh wait, but we never expected it to happen to like our daughter here. And they have that conversation. It's very real. It's like, we've told her for years growing up that like, you never discriminated against somebody. Everyone is equal. Everyone deserves the same. And they go, but we just never assumed that she would just bring home someone. And they kind of look at that and they say, well, and that's when Katharine Hepburn's attitude changes. She goes, well, she's happy. And honestly, we raised her that way. And I'm honestly proud that it's this version that we have to kind of just take a step and process it, rather than the opposite, which is like a totally racist daughter. And I think that's where Katharine Hepburn's changes. Spencer Tracy's character, it takes a much longer time for him to get on board with this relationship. But then at the end, he even realizes, he's like, it's not my choice whether or not you guys are together. You guys make each other happy, and it shouldn't be up to me. And I also love the idea that Sidney Poitier's character went to him and said, hey, if this is a deal breaker for you, let me know, because I don't want that animosity in the family.
That is why I'm asking for the clearest possible statement of what your attitude is going to be.
I appreciate that, Doctor.
So it's really interesting how each family member has just such a completely different outlook on this relationship. Sidney Poitier is basically saying, if you guys don't accept it, that's fine, but I don't want to waste my time. But whereas she's saying, if you guys don't accept it, who cares, because he's mine and I love him. And then the parents, one is saying, well, we raised her that way and I'm proud of the girl we raised and I'm going to support her. And the other parent's saying, but I don't like it. I don't want it. And then you have his parents even, who are black people, and his father immediately is like, no, I don't approve of this. And the mother is the one who has to kind of make sense, not just to her husband, but makes sense to Spencer Tracy's character as well. I mean, I think there's just such a great dynamic to having all these different family members all gathered together. The whole movie takes place over the course of one night. And I like that dynamic of just over the course of one night, how so many people's outlooks just on race and relationships change. And nowadays, obviously, there's been so many films that have just kind of built on that template. Like Get Out takes this very basic premise of, bringing a black person home to a white family and dealing with that, to becoming something completely different and making a genre film. But I think of the time, I think this is a pretty successful conversation on race. You know, it isn't anything groundbreaking in sense of like trend setting, but I think it is very important, especially given the time, to show a happy interracial marriage and make a film about people coming around to it. Whereas nowadays, it would, you know, you don't need to make films like that necessarily because the world is more accepting. But at the same time, maybe sometimes they aren't. So maybe films like this are important to keep around, to learn from, to an extent. It's very interesting. And then you also have this other guy that he was supposed to play golf with, also at the dinner, who is just kind of there from the beginning and says, they love each other, let them stay together. And he kind of remains unchanged the whole film. But I guess he's a fun comedic relief because he gets nominated for an Oscar for it. So
talking about it really just kind of makes me think like, yeah, I mean, I definitely think this movie is important. I love movies that do like challenge the status quo, challenge the norm. It is pretty powerful in that way. I can't say that, you know, I severely enjoyed it myself, but like I didn't hate it either. I liked it.
Yeah.
But
also on the topic of Black history and Sidney Poitier, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning he is just such a charismatic presence. And I know we've both seen other films outside of these two that we're going to talk about, but it's just so interesting how every character is so different, but like at the center of all of them is just a good-natured person, like just such a good soul. And just for the sacrifice of him having like just go up to the father and say, hey, listen, like I love your daughter so much, but like if you don't accept us, like I do understand, but like I don't want to put your daughter through that if you are not accepting of us completely. And if not, I'll go on my way and I won't see you again. And it's like this admirable thing because usually it's like, no, you fight for your lives and your romances, but like at the same time, he knows that there's a bigger picture going on. And if he's not going to accept him now, he's never going to accept him. And it's really interesting. His character, I mean, just so charismatic too. Just everything he did was just so charismatic. You can't look away from him. And I think, you know, of all the actors in all these movies, I mean, like this cast is a strong cast. I mean, Katharine Hepburn, the most awarded actress in history, she's won 4 Oscars, and Spencer Tracy, another very well respected actor, which we'll talk about in just a second because there's something else I have to mention about him. But Sidney Poitier just steals the show every time, even though he's in this one, he's just kind of like he has the least amount of growth in a sense because he loves her, and that's kind of how he stays the whole time. It's more about the other characters, family members growing to meet the two couples and meet them in the middle, but he still is entrancing to watch.
But you think of yourself as a colored man. I think of myself as a man.
Just a very well-rounded actor in general.
Yeah, I have to say, you know, because we chose this month, you know, because, you know, unfortunately, Sidney Poitier passed away recently, and we were wondering, like, you know, what are we going to do? You know, like, oh, okay, unfortunately that happened. Let's honor him. Let's do this year because of that. And it's so interesting because I've always heard, you know, Sidney Poitier's name like so much. Classic actor, sure, great, okay, fine. But then, you know, and, you know, quotes from like the next movie we're going to talk about, I've heard a lot. And then, you know, actually going through some of his filmography, you know, it's just been so interesting just to see, you know, exactly what you're saying. This man who just like did so many different roles and just, you know, kind of, you know, different every single one. You know, I'm not going to say like, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis level or anything like that, but like, you know, just such a great actor, you know, from back in the day. And even like some recently in the early 90s with the Sneakers. That we watched recently, and I just can't wait to continue visiting more films by him because, like you said, if anything, he's just a magnificent presence in every movie he's in.
And then another actor I wanted to mention was Spencer Tracy. He was in Chad's favorite movie of 1961, Judgment at Nuremberg. He was the judge, so we are very, you know, familiar with him. But I think it's worth noting also, and this kind of plays into probably the idea of why Katharine Hepburn was so emotional in general. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy had a working relationship for like 25 years. They'd done at least 10 movies together. Like they were the Bonnie and Clyde, the legal Bonnie and Clyde of Hollywood. They were like in so many movies together. They became like best friends. And actually, Spencer Tracy was very ill while filming this film, and he died 17 days after the filming wrapped. So I don't know if you mentioned him when you were talking about the deaths of 1967, but he did die in June of 1967. 17 days after the film was completed. So the film got rushed to production to come out to qualify for Oscars December of 1967. So Katharine Hepburn says she's never seen the film. I mean, she's passed since then, but she never saw the film until the day she died because it was too emotional for her to watch back her memories, because this was the last film she did with Spencer Tracy. So I think there is an oddness to how much she cries in this movie, and it's not like a cry either. It's just her eyes are always watering, and I think there's a power to that in the fact that like she's just kind of like taking it all in, this relationship, but also as an actress, she's taking in the fact that this is the last time she's working with her best friend on set.
Until today, I would never have believed that I could say such a thing. But when she fights you, I'm going to be on her side.
And I think that also plays into her emotions. But I do agree it's a little weird toward the later bit of the film seeing her so emotional, but I do like how she's more empathetic in that sense, and she's just very happy for her daughter, that she's almost so welled up with emotions that she doesn't really know what to say, and she just kind of cries. I almost kind of interpreted it more as tears of joy rather than the opposite of like, you brought home a black man, I'm going to cry about it, because I think that's more of the dad's function was to be the disapproving one. But I do agree with what you said. Like, it does become not distracting, but it's something noticeable that you sometimes have to be like, wait, why is she crying? And it might be because of Spencer Tracy. It might not be. It just might be a choice. And obviously she's such a charismatic presence that like everything she does, I also was just drawn to, just because this is my first time seeing her act as well. And she's amazing as well.
Well, I mean, I think, for me coming into this film, like I just kind of like, I didn't know what to expect. So I didn't know if like these were going to be like the classical, like over the top, like racist people and stuff like that. Like, I knew the concept of, black man comes home to dinner, white parents, how are they going to react? Kind of a deal. And it starts like right away with that.
John Wade Prentice. Isn't that a lovely name?
John Wade.
Joanna Prentice, I'll be.
Because it was less racist than I thought it was going to be.
You almost wish they leaned harder into it to make a bigger statement. Yeah. No, and that's fair, because you see in Get Out, they are so racist that it like really emphasizes the point where it's like bashing you over the head with it, what I think is that film's intention. Whereas here, it's meant to just be this kind of lighthearted film, and I do think that's one criticism I have toward it, is the fact that like it could get a little deeper and almost dirtier with the subject matter, and the fact that like the next film we're going to talk about, it really goes deep into it. But this one, it does stay a little bit more lighthearted, because at the end of the day, this is more of a comedy. It's more of a, it was nominated for drama at the Globes, but it is more of a comedy in the sense that like, it's all these people gathering together, and by the end, everyone's a happy family, and that's just kind of the gist.
Yeah, true. Do you think Spencer Tracy's character would have voted for Obama for a third term?
Oh gosh, I would. I mean, who knows? Maybe. God, bringing in the Get Out references, I love it. Chad's the quotes man on the show. He knows the quotes. But yeah, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I almost said Guess Who's Coming Home to Dinner. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, up for 10 nominations, tied with the most with Bonnie and Clyde. It has 10 nominations. It wins 2. Katharine Hepburn wins Best Actress. I honestly probably would have campaigned her in supporting, but hey, it worked because she won Best Actress. Best Original Screenplay, it wins as well. It was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Director for Stanley Kramer, Best Actor for Spencer Tracy, who he was nominated posthumously, of course. Supporting Actor for Cecil Calloway, who plays, of course, Monsieur Mike Ryan, the one that I said, who just shows up having canceled the golf outing with the dad and just hangs out at the house. Supporting actress for B. Richards, who plays Sidney Poitier's mom in the film, who was also in The Heat of the Night. Original song score or adaptation score, art direction, and film editing. So it gets nominated for a lot. Speaking of quotable movies, though, They Call Me Mr. Tibbs. Let's talk about In the Heat of the Night.
Yep, In the Heat of the Night, directed by Norman Jewison, written by Sterling Siliphant, cinematography by Haskell Wexler, music by Quincy Jones. Okay, starring Sidney Poitier, Rod Steiger, Warren Oates, Lee Grant, Larry Gage, James Patterson, William Schallert, B. Richards, and more. A synopsis: Virgil Tibbs, a black detective from Philadelphia, becomes involved in a murder investigation in a small town in Mississippi. And also, what's his name? Ray
Charles
did the theme song for this movie, which is really cool. It's cool that they
does not get nominated for Best Song, which makes me think maybe it wasn't written for the movie, but I think it was written for the film, which means one of the biggest Oscar snubs of all time. Actually, the second biggest Oscar snub, because we'll talk about the first one, and this whole episode was devoted to him. Sidney Poitier does not get nominated for Best Actor for either of these films. The first one I get because Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, it's more about the parents coming to terms with the relationship. Here, though, it's all about him. And he doesn't win. He doesn't get nominated. And then his co-star, Rod Steiger, gets nominated and wins. I mean, make sense of that for me, Chad. I mean, nothing against Rod Steiger, but like, come on.
I think maybe okay. This is actually interesting. When I look at the thing about it, when I started listening to this audiobook, it like kind of like went into some of this a little bit, where he actually won Best Actor for Lilies in the Field, before In the Heat of the Night.
A few years prior.
It was one of those things where it's like, okay, first, black man to win Best Actor, right? So then you go, okay, so that's going to lead the way for other black people to be nominated and even win Academy Awards, but it actually doesn't work that way. It's more so like, kind of racist Hollywood of the time. Hey, look, this is one of the good ones. This is the one that we got. This is the one we like, and that's it. So we're good. We're not racist anymore. That's kind of
so like, we did it. We don't have to do it again.
The tokenism. That's kind of how it works in a lot of these institutions. But honestly, I don't understand if they did it before, why they wouldn't do it again. I think maybe for this movie, if they're thinking because, Rod Steiger is the one that does like go through the character growth, maybe they think him as more of the main character, but Sidney Poitier is the presence in this film. He's not the title character, but he is the main character, Virgil Tibbs. He's the one that goes through the movie solving the case, so I don't know. It's very perplexing.
I'll say right now, Virgil Tibbs is number 19 on AFI's top 100 heroes list for In the Heat of the Night. The quote, "They call me Mr. Tibbs," is number 16 on the 100 years quotes list, and then the film itself is number 75 on the AFI top 100. So like, there's no reason that he shouldn't have been nominated. It's just such a bullshit excuse from the Academy. Like, we did it once, we can, we don't have to do it. We don't have to worry about that anymore. It's like, no, like, it's so frustrating. Especially,
really, so I love, one of the reasons I really love Sidney Poitier, though, thinking back on this, is that, going all the way up to well before Django Unchained came out, I love seeing, someone who's like subjugated by race just kind of like snap back or clap back at people all the time. Because in Lilies of the Field, someone came up and called him boy, and then he called him boy. And that felt like a really great moment. And then here it's like, they call me Mr. Tibbs.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
And stuff like that. And you're like, oh, shit. Okay.
And it's great to hear that line in context, too, because the first time I heard that line was in The Lion King when Pumbaa says, "They call me Mr. Pig."
They call me Mr. Pig.
And I was like, why do I know this line? I've never seen this movie. And then people are talking about this line. They call me Mr. Tibbs. They call me. I'm like, where have I heard this? And I watched it. I was like, it's The Lion King. But yeah, I mean, it just shows how powerful the line. Yeah, it just emanates through pop culture. And I think this movie especially has really stood the test of time. Because at its core, it's a pretty fairly basic crime movie in the fact that like it's just two guys trying to solve the case, and there's really nothing crazily complex about that. There really isn't. I think the complexity comes with the conversations of race, where I think the real prominent storyline is not the case, is not figuring out who murdered this guy. It is him, learning to, or not him learning, but other people learning to accept him, and him gaining the respect or lack thereof respect, and just confronting this racist, sea of buffoons around him. And that's what I think makes this such a special movie, is because you have all those layers and other things going on top of the fact that it's a crime movie. But of course, the Academy, because it's a good crime movie, some people who may or may not be racist may still just look at it as that and say good. So it really covers both grounds really well. Good commentary and a good film in its own way.
I like how you put that, where it's like, the crime aspect, the detective aspect, the solving the case, that's on the side, and really like the main story is him trying to solve this case and be like actually taken seriously as the expert that he is. And the main antagonist of the movie is the town itself, the racism, the hatred that's just embedded in the culture there. And where they don't even want, like, the one guy doesn't even want him in the room, while the one lady who was raped is answering questions to the police, even though he is the police. He's like,
Right.
how disrespectful that you had a black man in the room while we're going through the sensitive stuff. And it's like, wow, okay. Because it's like, you just don't think some of the crazy racist stuff that people would bring up, like, I don't know. It's just weird, like, looking at it like, what? Like, I don't understand that. But yeah, it's just seeing all of the little roadblocks that he has to go through. Like, dude's just trying to solve a case, and then he's got to be chased throughout a warehouse and like wield a pipe and stuff, so that he doesn't get his ass kicked or get killed. And
I was gonna ask,
do the right thing.
Did you foresee the murderer being the murderer it was? I don't necessarily want to spoil it here, just in case people haven't seen it. But did you see it coming? Because it's one of those things where I didn't really see it coming, but the person was present enough in the movie that I was like, this guy's got to have a purpose in the movie, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. Because I think the beauty of movies like this, and that's why it's sometimes a trap for movies like this, is that if you guess who the killer is, or the killer is not a satisfying enough reveal, if they're not a big enough character, it can ruin the whole movie. It really can. And that's why I think some of the Agatha Christie novels fall victim of some of the Kenneth Branagh reinterpretations, like the Murder on the Orient Express and all that stuff. It's like, if you figure it out, is it a very satisfying payoff? Whereas I think adding this whole layer of race and stuff and making that the primary thing is what forgives any sort of like unsatisfying ending. Because I wasn't really satisfied by the actual case, the murder case ending. Like, I was like, yeah, just kind of end it. But I think it's one of those things where the destination is not as important as the journey, whereas some crime movies make it so much about the destination and who the killer is, and like that big reveal, almost like the Scooby-Doo thing. It's always like, who's behind the mask, rather than the destination, than the journey it took getting there. Whereas I like this film because it takes that journey rather than making it about the destination. It's like, well, let's just explore the journey and the ins and outs of just this corrupt, racist justice system before we reveal who the murderer was, because that really doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I agree with you where I think that the actual reveal of the killer is not impactful, or like you're just like, oh yeah, okay, I thought it probably was him, or it could have been him. But yeah, I think the thing that makes this movie so great is exactly the journey of finding the things and just seeing, because the cops, until Tibbs gets there, they just chase a guy, and then they're like, oh, we chased a guy, he ran, so we locked him up, that's the guy. And it's like, I'm sorry, but that's actually how a lot of cops, I feel like, act today, where they're like, we chased a guy and we got him. That's the guy. Yeah. And
the first person they bring in is Tibbs. He is the first person they bring in, which is crazy, because they could have easily said, if he didn't have his badge on him, they could have easily been like, okay, we got a guy, let's just make it him and call it a day, and case closed. Absolutely, and that's terrifying, especially if you are in the justice system, to see that and be like, geez.
But then it's really just kind of cool that Virgil Tibbs, like, is such a good character. Like, you'll see, like, I think Sidney Poitier does this really great, because like he doesn't take the racism and like lash back out at people in such a way that you think he might, but he takes it and he actually kind of uses it to his advantage, like to solve the crime. Like they throw him in jail at one point, and then he's like, while I'm in here, I'm going to question this guy and look at his arm, and actually look at the details and solve the case. And while they're so wrapped up in getting the wrong guy and being racist, he's actually like over here just solving the case the whole time.
Yeah. And it's brilliant. Just like him being able to tell that the killer was right-handed versus left-handed. That stuff that like, and it's funny watching the other cops kind of react, or the other detectives react and be like, oh shoot, we wouldn't have known that. It just shows like that this guy that they look down upon and they call names and they think must be like undervalued, when they find out how much he gets paid and just realizing how good he is, they realize, oh shit, yeah, no, he is the real deal. And it kind of humbles them, some to the extent where they change, and some where they get so stubborn that they become even more racist as a fact, because they're jealous almost. And that's why I think Rod Steiger's character is interesting, because he does have a lot of growth. But I mean, I just wasn't as invested in his character as I was in Tibbs. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I get nominating both of them even would have been fine, even if Sidney Poitier doesn't win but gets nominated. But the fact that they nominate only one of them and it's him and he wins, like, I think just looking at the other nominations in the category, like even three of them being from these movies we saw, like Warren Beatty as Clyde and Bonnie and Clyde, Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate, and then like Spencer Tracy, a posthumous award. You could have awarded one of the greatest actors of all time posthumously for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but you give it to the co-star of the star of the movie. And it's just one of those things, like, I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me. And I get all the excuses they try to give, but it's like it shows that while they're so willing to award a Best Picture to this, they still have a lot to go in terms of progressiveness and just being more accepting of just all types of performances, to the point where it takes till 2002 for Halle Berry to become the first ever Black Best Actress winner.
Yeah.
Like, if the world ended in 2000, like a lot of people thought, then we would have never gotten a Black Best Actress winner. Like, that's just crazy to me.
It is.
And it's just a shame. It's a shame that it's just not more progressive in general.
I remember when I was watching with the wife, and we were watching In the Heat of the Night, and we're just looking up the awards, like, Sidney probably won this or whatever, because he's such talked about. It's a great character. And then I remember she looked it up, and then she went like, the white guy won. I was like, which one?
Right, because it's like, which they're all kind of supporting him. Like, the whole role of a supporting actor is to support the main interest, and he is the main interest of the movie, and everyone else, I think, is supporting him. I get why Spencer Tracy is the lead of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, because it's his character who's going through the growth of accepting this couple. Whereas here, it's like, this is Sidney Poitier changing the landscape of this police department and like solving the case himself. Like, he is the lead of this movie, and it's just such a damn shame. I'm gonna look and see if it was nominated for any like Golden Globes for Sidney Poitier, or if he was just snubbed across the board. Let's see. He was nominated for the BAFTA for this, but Rod Steiger still won. But at least they were both nominated. Golden Globes, they were both nominated. Rod Steiger won. So Rod Steiger was just running away with it, but at least Sidney Poitier was nominated for the Globes and for the BAFTAs. Yeah, it just seems like they were all in favor of him. Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe they're wrong and we're both right. But
we're both right.
Yeah, but a really good movie. And I like the idea of just making it in the South and having the title be In the Heat of the Night, because you kind of feel the heat of the night in the atmosphere. You just kind of like can sense the heat, and just not the heat temperature wise, but just the heat of the moment, and just the gravity and the stakes. I definitely think they bring just so many more layers to just this very basic crime story that just elevates it.
Yeah, I think it, like, when you add like the whole like heat of the South, and like, that's kind of like adds to the fuel of like the racism, the heat of all of that. And it's kind of like, a movie that we won't get to because it was criminally not nominated, to Do the Right Thing, where they kind of do a lot of the same things, where they have a lot of the kind of like red, the color red, and like hot, like kind of like hues to kind of convey, racist, like, kind of fury and mindset and stuff. And just the heat of the summer, things building about to explode. And I think that's kind of similar to In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah, Do the Right Thing. I mean, poor Spike Lee. I mean, Do the Right Thing doesn't get nominated, and then Driving Miss Daisy wins that year. And then in 2018, Black Klansman finally nominated, but loses to Green Book. It's like literally deja vu for Spike Lee.
In the face twice.
Losing the award twice to the movie about the white racist making friends with a black person in the car. And I have thoughts about those movies. I actually do like one of those two movies a lot, but like I still think it's like just for Spike Lee to have to go through making these really landscape changing black cinema pictures, to lose to films that are for a certain audience important in him enlightening them, but also feel a little bit safe, I guess. I don't know. We'll get to it when we get to those years, but I mean, just the safe choice seems to be an Academy favorite. Like Rod Steiger, great actor, but that is the safe choice. I'm sorry.
Well, at least this year, one of the better movies, or like, one of the best movies ever made, won the Academy Award this year for Best Picture.
That's true. I mean, the movie itself won, which I think is already a step in the right direction. But nominated for 7 awards, and it wins 5. So like, it was still an Academy favorite. It won all but 2. The 2 it lost were sound effects, and director Norman Jewison lost to Mike Nichols, rightfully so, I think. But it wins Best Picture, Best Actor for Rod Steiger, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Sound, and Best Film Editing. So we talked about it a little bit, just like that this was one of the better films, but let's actually see where it ranks. Let's rank these 5 films from bottom to top. I think I know what our number 5 is, but I might be different. I might have a different idea of what your number 5 is going to be. But Chad, what is your number 5?
In the Heat of... No, so it's like Dr. Dolittle.
I was going to make that same joke, but I was going to say Dr. Dolittle was number 1, but you beat me to it. It's my number 5 as well. What is your number 4?
Bonnie and Clyde was my number 4.
My number 4 is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. So what is your number 3?
Number 3 is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
My number 3 is the Best Picture, In the Heat of the Night.
Okay.
What is your number 2?
In the Heat of the Night.
My number 2 is Bonnie and Clyde, which means our number 1 is
The Graduate.
The Graduate. That is right. So
Yeah.
The Graduate, we don't have to flip a coin. It is the best picture of 1967.
On
and I think,
rewatch for this one, I was like, I just fell in love with it again. I was like, that has to be this movie.
so good.
Sorry, it's the best.
Yeah, I mean, this was my first watch of all the other films besides The Graduate. So, like, in time, maybe in the heat of the night or Bonnie and Clyde, who will be as revered to me as The Graduate. But The Graduate is like definitely top 15 all time for me. Maybe top 10. Like, I've never sat down and made a list, but like it's up there. One of my favorite films. Definitely my favorite film, I think, of the 60s for sure. Which is, a big statement. But even more so than like West Side Story, even, which I loved and we talked about in 1961. I think this one's even better. It'll be nice at the very end of this. Maybe we go back to each decade and rank the 10 Best Picture winners or our Best Picture winners from those years.
That sounds fun.
9 years down the line, we're finally done with the show. So, Chad, now we got to award our Best Actor and Best Actress. I believe I have actress first. So you have actor first. So why don't you take it away with your Best Actor since you get the first pick?
Well, you know what? Because of the Academy, I'm going to do it justice. I'm going to give it to Sidney Poitier.
That's the right choice.
I feel like he just like really crushed it in this role. He had that reserved, strong presence in that role. And then he, kind of combated all the racists with not giving them the satisfaction of breaking down and, giving them probably what they wanted to see. Instead, no, he's serious the whole time solving the case. And then even when he goes to talk to that one guy in the jail, he starts cracking jokes a little bit and having some fun. So it's all business for him.
Yeah, I mean, that was my choice. So it's going to be tough, but I'm tempted to do this. I'm going to also give it to Sidney Poitier for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Just because I think he has so many great moments throughout his whole career. But I think while your performance that you picked in the Heat of the Night is, in my opinion, the better one, I think just the versatility of being able to be this like very sweet, charming guy that this girl brings home, and then just transition to Mr. Tibbs, and then also transition to Lilies of the Field, where he's like almost so fun that he's like this exuberant extrovert, to like the Defiant Ones, where he's a totally different character. Sneakers, he's a different character. Raisin in the Sun, he's a different character. Like his versatility is so good, and I think for Black History Month, because we both awarded a different film the number one, I think it's right that we both are awarding Sidney Poitier for his legacy and just the fact that he is so good in all these roles. And while Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is a little bit more of a subdued performance, I think it's still a really great one, and he just stole the show for me in that one. So I'm very happy to give him my Best Actor.
If I had a B, it would be Dustin Hoffman.
Yes, he was my backup as well. Like I think those two performers are the ones really to highlight. But I am going to give The Graduate some love, because for Best Actress, I am going to go with Anne Bancroft as Mrs. Robinson. I think it is a great, like you said, villain performance, but at the same time, she does have those moments where you can at least understand and empathize with where she's coming from, even though it's her manners of going about it are so evil. But, it's a really seductive performance also. Like, it's one of those things where, like, she's very hot, and it's interesting because it's like she epitomizes the cougar type in that movie so well. But we've seen her in The Elephant Man and other things just be so warm and charming. So, and The Miracle Worker is another example, something so helpful. Whereas here, it's like there's a totally different character than any of the other characters Anne Bancroft has played. So she is my Best Actress. Who's your Best Actress, Chad?
Well, I mean, that was probably going to be it if you didn't select her. Because I love to hate her in that movie because she's so great. But actually, I went with her daughter, Catherine Ross, in The Graduate. Nothing against like any of the other lady performers of the year. I thought a lot of them were great, but I don't know. I just loved like all the performances pretty much in this one, especially that whole triangle. And I loved that she was really. She just like wanted to go on a date with him. She got disappointed, and then she went on to, and I just loved just her entire presence in that movie, and especially just like that end sequence where she's about to get married, and then he's like literally fighting for her with the cross, and then the end scene, just like I think like they both just like play that end scene on the bus so well too. It just I just really loved her throughout that movie.
Yeah, because she needs to be a rooting interest, so you understand 100% why he's changing his changing his way to go with her rather than Miss Robinson.
Absolutely.
So there we have it. Our best picture of 1967 is The Graduate. My best actor is Sidney Poitier in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Chad's best actor is Sidney Poitier in The Heat of the Night. My best actress is from The Graduate and Bancroft, and his best actress is from The Graduate, Catherine Ross. My backup, actually, if I didn't get in Bancroft, was going to be the Seal in Dr. Dolittle. She just was phenomenal. Beautiful work. Anyway, speaking of beautiful work, next month, we are talking about some beautiful and recent work. That's right. Following the Pickle Awards, which are my own personal awards, we will talk about the actual Oscars of 2021, talking about the slate of 10. That's right. We have 10 movies to watch. Oh, it's going to be fun, though. And those 10 movies are Belfast, Coda, Don't Look Up, Drive My Car, Dune Part 1, King Richard, Licorice Pizza, Nightmare Alley, The Power of the Dog, and West Side Story 2021, because now there are 2 of them. So, Chad, a very exciting slate coming up. I know some of your thoughts on some of these movies. You know some of mine, but I'm going to rewatch them all, so I might like a lot of them more than I did before, and vice versa. There might be a movie I love that I'm going to come and just bash that I hate, or vice versa. No, but we love all movies here at Picture This, even the ones that aren't great. They provide great discussion, like Dr. Dolittle. So you're worthy of something, Dr. Dolittle.
Yeah, I mean,
any last words?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen all of those movies. I've seen all but one, but one's being added to, I believe, Hulu soon. So I'm looking
HBO Max, yes.
Oh, HBO Max. I'm looking forward to seeing that for the first time, and then rewatching all of them too, because I really like a lot of those movies. So I'm excited to actually try to rank those. It's kind of a daunting task because I really, really like a lot of those movies. So
yeah. So Chad, before I ask you to tell everyone where they can find you, I just want to tell everyone watching that you can find Chad this Monday, because this video is going to come out beforehand, but Chad will be competing in Marvel Trivia on Monday. So we have taped it by the time you're watching this, but it is not aired till the Monday after. But Monday, stay tuned, because Chad's going to compete in some trivia with some cool people. Chad, where else can they find you?
Yeah, well, I'm about to take on JD Domash in MCU Trivia. Don't know how that's going to go. I'll have to do a promo, I guess. We'll see. That's going to be fun. However, yeah, I guess you can find me like just doing trivia stuff around TMG. I'm trying to expand. I've got into like multiplex and, just everywhere pretty much. Trying to rank stuff over and rank them, things like that. It's really fun. I'm doing that tomorrow, actually. But yeah, I also, here. And then I also do my own channel, Chadwick Webb. Dill's on there a lot of the times, who ranks stuff like Christmas and Edgar Wright. And there's a Harry Potter one I will get out someday. And then we got to do a Denis Villeneuve at some point, because I think that'd be really fun.
That's my fault, because I'm slacking a little bit on it, but
kind of long in the making. But yeah, we'll get it done and start doing that more regularly, because ranking's fun. I like ranking stuff. So and then I do movie battlegrounds over at TMG. I'm actually having some big matches for that coming up. One where I'll be drinking. So it'll be interesting.
Interesting. Can't wait to see that.
Yeah. So debate's fun, but can be frustrating. But we'll see. It's going to be a great time. Thank you, Dill. This was a very fun episode, and I look forward to 2021 movies.
Yeah, we're taking a big leap. Yeah, you can find me at Dylan_Randazzo, Twitter, Letterboxd. Go check me out. I've got to log a lot of these films on Letterboxd. I've gotten a little slow because I've just been trying to cram in all the watching without taking the time to write about it. But I will. And you can find me here at the Dill Pickle Movie Network. This will be a podcast available soon. I'm trying to get the works to make this audibly accessible, because we had a great guest on last month, Dan Skip Allen, who recommended having us on podcast form, which I think is going to be super beneficial. So I can't wait to do that. So hopefully by the end of March, by our next episode, you guys will be able to take us on the go. And I will update all the old episodes, because we will be coming on I believe our 13th episode. It'll be a whole year. Next month will be the 1-year anniversary, because I believe we started with March, and then April was the I believe we did 1994 in March, and then the next one in April, I believe, because the Oscars were in April last year, which was 8, I believe. So, yeah, so it's going to be interesting to have our 1-year anniversary, and I do have a little graphic ready to make to just show off the last year in Picture This, just to like recognize. Tonight was actually the first night ever that someone has won now 2 acting prizes here at Picture This, and it is Sidney Poitier, who won 2 Best Actors in one night. That's pretty good. But yeah, I've been keeping some records just to show off at the end of this this all. But yeah, we're hitting year 2. We're gonna get more guests in the future. We're committed to it. We're gonna cover some big series in the future. We've got 2 series lined up, one for this year, one for next year. 2 trilogies that were nominated. One of them nominated consecutively in 3 years in a row. So that'll be fun to watch. But yeah, we're gonna cover all that and more. We're gonna have some Christmas movies in December, some Halloween movies in October. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So stay with us for year 2 of Picture This. It's been a pleasure. From Chad and Dylan, signing off. We'll see you next time. Bye.